Hiya, thanks for joining us again. And this is actually the third in a series of Q&As where we're asking industry experts their thoughts on some key topics. And today we're focusing on legal market. And I'm delighted to have with us again Derek Southall from the CEO and founder of Hyperscale Group. Hi, Derek.
Hi there, thank you.
Okay. So today, the subject that I had is innovation in law. Is it a myth or a reality? And, is it an impossible dream for a law firm? So quite a heavy subject, but quite an important subject, I think, that people would want to know. So I suppose just to kick off the questions, we know the answer to this, but does innovation exist in a law firm?
It is
now, not 50 years ago, now maybe.
Yeah. It is a really interesting question. So I think, again, if you wound the clock back a few years, I think law firms wouldn't really have seen a need to be innovative. It's not a phrase that was bandied around in the market. The last few years, that's certainly ramped up. And I think what people have realized is, I look at this market. I've been in this market, say, 25 plus years. I've seen more happen probably in the last 5 than the 20 before. So the rate of change in the market has really accelerated. Law, this $840 billion undigitized market now is digitizing like mad. And so the rate of change and the client expectations have altered. I think running a law firm used to be relatively simple. Basically all you had to do was to broadly employ the right number of people with the right skills at the right time, to match up the demand, and you had a cost plus model, and all of a sudden, everything went fine. That's now moved to, if you like, much more demanding clients, new models, effectively. So, in short, the market has had to move. The FT and Rina Sengupta have been really good at doing a study on this, which probably started about 15 years ago. And looking at innovation in law firms, which again we've been lucky to sort of benefit from. But I think you can break innovation down in law firms probably into 2 or 3 areas, and I think there's innovation in actually how you deliver the product. So how you deliver the law. So an example of that would be if you came up with a fantastic scheme to securitize pension schemes, to raise money in a different way. You're genuinely using your lawyer's brain. Yeah. I can see a way through this. I know somebody who, for example, created a whole new legislative regime to deal with, that they adapted law to actually deal with some difficult issues to do with smart metering to make something possible. So I think that's your legal innovation. You've then got business of law innovation, which is how you're set up. So we've seen all sorts of things. We've seen offshore centres. We've seen the growth of the alternative legal service provider. We've seen virtual law firms, you name it, all these different models to deliver services. And then you've got your third camp, which is really your almost your digital innovation, doing things smarter. And this could be an AI product. This could be, again, just a couple of examples. There is a business called Solomonic, and what they do is that they analyze law firms and corporates and the way they behave in litigation, so that if you're up against somebody, you can actually almost tell how they'll behave, what their success rates, what their tactics will be, and that's really data mapping, but in a very sophisticated way. I've seen law firms. I'm just trying to think of a good example of digital innovation. I've seen law firms actually build products to automatically scan, for example, fraudulent practices on eBay, on passing off, to automatically initiate claims. So you've got those 3 pots really. So it absolutely exists now. There are a whole range of people trying to drive this forward in different firms. If I were a cynic, I would probably turn around and say innovation does exist in law firms, but I struggle sometimes to see the divide between what is actual just business transformation and what is innovation. And I think there's a spectrum there that you sometimes it's difficult to tell when you cross that line.
Do you think innovation is essential though? Is it essential for the survival? We talk about innovation as in this sort of mystical thing that will solve everything. Do you think it is essential?
I think it is. Well, point number one, I think there is a danger of it being overhyped. In that it needs to become something that you're doing as part of your natural course of things, as opposed to a thing. We've probably all been there, but we've seen that hackathons advertised, we've seen the sprints and a lot of that sort of stuff. One has to query, is it innovation theatre or reality? But there is definitely an imperative that we are definitely in a changing market. We're in this massive undigitized market, and where there is change, there is opportunity. So we need to do that. I think the bar is being raised in terms of what clients want from both a service level and a cost and efficiency perspective. So there's an imperative there. I think from an employing people perspective, people now in law firms, the people you employ, they don't want to do mundane routine tasks. You'd be amazed. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been blessed. I was a partner in a big law firm, and I've got involved in some really exciting groundbreaking stuff. But at points in your career, you'd be amazed how mundane the job is. You're sent into a data room with 100,000 documents, and it was like, we're going to buy this company, look for the problems. Some of that work isn't fun. And I think more and more now, people coming into the profession want to know that a firm is being innovative, is trying to drive its sort of capability further forward.
Well, I mean, talking about driving of innovation within within a legal firm, do you think they need somebody there specifically that drives that, or can that be done by IT? I suppose it's two questions there, but is it IT that drives it? Is it just IT that drives innovation, or do they need somebody within the organisation that's their specific role, or is it a mixture of everybody coming together? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, I guess in an ideal world, you wouldn't have anybody, and this would just happen. In an organisation, it just would happen culturally, but in the real world, places aren't built like, law firms aren't built like that. I think, I guess I've both been an IT person and an innovation person and responsible for both and stuff like this. And so I can see the pros and cons of both. So the great thing about IT people is they think for the longer term, and they build things that they've got to live with, and they build things according to good processes which are sustainable, okay, and they think of the wider issues like security and everything. The problem is, for IT people, they never have enough domain knowledge because they've never got enough time. So law firms have multiple products in different areas. There's no way in the world can our IT department get to all of that. Sometimes the speed at which these things happen as well really cross the IT process. Sometimes you do need stuff that's more iterative, and that doesn't necessarily sit well. So that's not ideal. And actually, in fairness to most IT professionals, they've got their hands full. I've worked with many an IT director, and I've said to them, I wouldn't want your job, and I don't know why you do, because it's a very, very demanding job. The things that could go wrong for you on a daily basis are, it's a full order book. The problem with innovation people, the positives are they've normally got a bit more domain knowledge. Often in law firms, they're lawyers. They can see the issues that they're very, and actually lawyers are very used to. You think about your conventional lawyers; they're very used to working on the job, executing, and moving on, and that suits the psyche of almost an innovation person. The negatives are, though, often it's short term, often it's not sustainable. You end up with lots of point solutions because they don't understand the tech stack. And actually, I was a corporate finance lawyer. Now, there's lots of lawyers, and I probably thought at the time, well, I understand what it's like to be a lawyer. You go into a contentious area like litigation, or into a projects area like PFI, or a banking area. Don't get me wrong, you understand it, but you might as well be in a different planet sometimes. So there isn't a person, if you like, that ticks all those boxes anyway. So in a way, what you really need is a perfectly functioning team, really, that play nicely. I think you need a mix of both. What we're seeing is also, we've done a lot of stuff as sort of innovation as a service, and we've seen a lot more demand for that recently. And I think it's because if you work in an organization, you've got really deep organizational knowledge, but you'll work on, say, your top 4 priorities with, say, 15 people. So you see that, and you're experts in that. We haven't got that, but we see that. And I think the trick with innovation all of the time, it's about getting the right skills in the right team, in the right mix. And I think that's almost like the ideal formula. It's not any one person. Everybody I've ever seen who thinks that they are God's gift, you know, they walk into the room, I will solve all of this. You feel like saying to them, look, you're trying to solve the problems this organization hasn't been able to solve for the last 150 years. You know, good luck with that. You know, it needs a very much more holistic approach.
So I suppose that, I think that we'd say that would encompass, within that group, people would encompass fee earners and partners, and I suppose they've got to be part of that conversation, would you say?
You've absolutely got to be, because I think, I mean, on the assumption now that most law firms have got a fairly decent platform, there might still be work going on, but all the core tech and organizational stuff's there. Once you've gone past that, you're absolutely got to get under the skin of the legal groups and how work is delivered, which means you've got to understand the pain points, you've got to understand the processes. And this is a real problem, because if you're driving innovation from anywhere within an IT department to an innovation person, you try to engage with lawyers, and even if a lawyer wants to work with you, they get pulled off on client projects. Your incentivization models for lawyers in most organizations don't include, they're typically around billing, client service, you know, hours work. They're not, they don't take into account any of these things, which are all about practice improvement. And I think the big bit that lots of lawyers have got to, well, it's sinking in now, but lawyers have been very used to, and this has been perfectly legitimate, technology being done for them. They turn up one day and there is a new document and email management system. We're now in an era where technology has to be done with you, which basically means, you know, a lot of the things, if a lawyer wants a great AI system in their practice area, they've got to work with some IT people or innovation people to develop that, to train it up, to do all of the things. If not, it's not going to happen.
You're right, because you can bring in you could bring something like that to the party and just say, oh, you know, AI is the next thing, bring it in. Okay, there it is there. You need to be able to understand what that needs to be able to do in a real business case and a business scenario for, you know, for a fee earner or a partner. They've got to be part of that, in my opinion, anyway. I think yours as well. They've got to be part of that conversation, because it's a valuable conversation that's only going to benefit everybody, I think.
It is, and this applies even to assessing products. So, you know, again, I was a lawyer by background, but I saw a product which I thought genuinely was brilliant for dealing with certain aspects of litigation, and they'd done a really good job of it. But you sit there going, you know, I was knowledgeable about it, but the only way I was going to get a proper view on this product was to actually bring a couple of quite senior litigators in, both of whom were quite formidable characters. And I was like slightly nervous, but again, they subscribed to my view. But you can't, it's almost the point where you can't even buy legal tech properly, that sort of legal tech, without involving these people, because you can't force them to it. That they need to believe in it. And they need to be willing to almost say, okay, if you buy that, if you go and spend 40 grand on that, we will work with you over 6 months and we will make this happen. Hopefully, what one bugbear is there's too many toolkits in the market, and we're seeing the emergence more of productized, almost out-of-the-box deployment tools. And I think that's helpful, because lawyers are very happy if they see something that is good, that will make a difference. They're very good at spending the money if that's there, but they're not so good at actually putting 6 months of work in themselves, because that's hard given the dynamics of their practice.
No, I mean, I suppose one of the questions was, how do you encourage innovation within an organization? Which I'm kind of thinking about that question as in how you encourage it. You know, some people say, if it's not broke, don't fix it, that kind of thing. But sometimes, you know, you can say that for so long, and then, you know, next thing you know, it's 1980, next thing you know, it's 2020, and, you know, you've always said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But there's lots of other things that have been brought out in that period of time that can really empower your business. Okay, so we're talking about, you know, so how do you encourage innovation? I suppose, who are we looking at to encourage within, you know, I suppose it's a bit of a mixed bag really, but who are we looking to encourage, and how do you encourage innovation in the law firm?
I think there are several dimensions to this, and there's a lot of really good thinking about almost what you refer to as the innovation canvas. But I think there's several aspects. I think one, there's an education aspect. So lawyers, I think they're one of their biggest strengths is one of their weaknesses. So every lawyer I've ever met has been really hardworking, has cared about their clients. So they're very driven in doing that. But because they're so focused on that, they're not perhaps looking around them as much. So actually, sometimes you have to educate them about what is going on in their market. You know, what's going on in prop tech, what's going on in death tech, what's going on in speed tech. There's a piece around that. There's a piece around competitors. That you know, lawyers look to their peers, and if all of a sudden they find out one of their major competitors is doing something, that really does spur them on. So I think there's a key point there. Clients, there is nothing that drives innovation more than a big client going, I want this to change, I need to do X, or a big possible mandate, particularly in the corporate firm. You know, client trumps all, as it were. And I think that's so the more you can actually demonstrate, or the more things cross your desk. I used to deal in a former life, I used to deal a lot with the weird tenders that came in, and you really did see the ante being up. You know, you used to get some very sweeping questions. You really got some, you know, tell us what you're going to do in what area of work, what benefit will there be, what benefit will go to us, what's your time frames for delivery, you know. So that sort of stuff drives it as well. And what you've somehow got to do as well with this is, I mean, I firmly believe this. We are in this era. So traditionally, you know, you've had this law firm model where law firms have been profitable, but fundamentally their ability to make money has been linked to the linked to headcount. You know, there'll be a finite number of hours that people can work and a finite rate that they can pay. We're now in this era where, because of technology, you almost could get to a point where you've got an exponential return. So if a fantastic law firm in Leeds did something really smart with, say, employment law, and leverage tech and productize that, all of a sudden that small firm in Leeds could become the biggest law firm in the world. Just like we see a brilliant book on this called Exponential Organizations, about how businesses scale. But the legal profession probably needs to recalibrate. No longer is the ability of the legal profession to make money linked to headcount. And that is probably the biggest opportunity the legal profession will have ever had. You know, it's almost like all bets are off. Let's go off and do some great things.
What was that book called again, Derek? Just, it might be of value to people.
It's a book called Exponential Organizations, and it's basically it analyzes the businesses in the world that have had exponential growth and why. Now, obviously, there's many of these things are tech businesses, but there's also, I mean, interesting, there's a category of what they call ecosystem businesses. So an example would be if Facebook grows exponentially and you produce the most phenomenal digital video widget for Facebook, by nature, you will grow exponentially because you're on that thing. Yeah, you've only got to look at this. It's sort of, so again, it's an interesting example where you could, so there is, I'll speak openly about a firm. There's a firm, TLT, this is all public knowledge. And one of the things they've done is they've tried to look at some products which they think are great in the market, and they are great products that solve particular problems. And what they've gone and done is created a model where they will resell, they'll do implementations, they'll do overflow services, a whole range of things. Now, that's, again, it's smart thinking. They're sitting there thinking, well, don't know if we want to do that on our own, but here's something great. Here's a chance we can grow with the market. And there's numerous other examples. So I think this is how we've got to think more as a sector, really. And it's a way that we haven't been used to doing in the past.
Yeah, I think you're right there with that. But just, I mean, talk about innovation. I mean, whose responsibility should innovation be with? Or where should it sit? Whose responsibility is it within it? It's pointing the finger and saying, you know, responsive for innovation within here. Who would it be then, would you say?
I think I mean, the reality of it is, you know, it needs to be everyone, and it needs to be culture. You know, you need to recognise that every year you need to have improved the business and your area of the business.
Can I just jump in and ask you a very quick question just there? Just on that subject about innovation, it needs to be everybody. I do understand what you're saying there, and I'm wondering if, I think I touched on it before, or we both touched on it, which is, I think sometimes innovation can be organic as well, with, you know, driven by, you know, not necessarily just the firm, but driven by the client, but also maybe driven by new fee earners coming through. Like I think we touched on either on this one or another one, which are used to certain pieces of technology, maybe coming from a different firm or coming through and saying, you know, why are we not using this? It can reduce our time by 25%. It can reduce our, you know, it can reduce the work that we need to do by 25% or something like that. I don't know. Or, sorry, make it more efficient by 25%. So I think that, sorry to jump in there, but I think that also innovation can also be organic as well, and the responsibilities.
It's absolutely, because there's a lot of research on this, and many people, when they're thinking of innovation, they think about, you know, the invention of Facebook or the big magic moment, the huge project. Most successful innovation is incremental, and it builds and builds and builds. And I think that there's a huge amount of sort of truth in that. I think there's a senior partner I worked with years ago who was a bit of a genius, but he always used to have this expression and said, look, if you are doing the same thing year after year, okay, what you are probably doing is you're failing the practice because you're not improving it. You are failing yourself because you're not progressing, and you are not creating great opportunities for all the people coming behind us. And it was one of his tests and appraisals. He says, right, tell me what you've done different this year. Tell me how you've grown it. One of the models we've adopted, we've done things within law firms where this was remarkably effective. It was one of your moments where you're thinking, is this a bit of a risky strategy? But we did a digital fitness assessment of some practice groups. So what we did, we looked at every aspect we could think of effectively how well you were working digitally. So some of these would be some basics like space utilization, training-based help desk calls, paper printed, you know, all this. And then you looked at other things, as in, for example, successful transformation projects implemented, successful client propositions taken with technology. And it was fascinating because it just created this sense of thing. But where you get to, I mean, you've got to ask, you know, you run a successful business, and the same thoughts will go through your mind as my mind is. Every year, every month, you're thinking to yourself, how can we be better? How can we improve this? How can we evolve? If you are a partner or a senior fee earner in a law firm, that's how you need to think. And what really this is, where does innovation sit? It needs to sit in this. One thing I've been quite good at, and so one model I've adopted, which actually was quite good, where people struggle with, you know, incentivizing people. Really basic tip. We put this into career competencies. So it's a bit like you shouldn't be entitled to go to become a partner of this firm unless you've implemented one successful transformation project. Or you shouldn't be, and you could build down smaller levels of this. Because you sit there going, what do you expect of your people? You do not expect your people to be coming in almost like mechanically doing the job, semi-asleep at the wheel and going home. If these are senior people progressing, you need them to be inventing things and progressing things and finessing things, as opposed to just you know, just meandering along.
It's continuous improvement as well, isn't it? Sorry to interrupt. It's continuous improvement as well. It benefits, you know, the firm itself. I think it's continuous improvement.
The bit law firms have struggled with, and they do, the model, there is a whole piece around the remuneration model and how people are, you know, rewarded for their efforts. And a lot of that has been around bills rendered, profitability, client wins. And that's the bit where people have been challenged here, because we're now in this era where you can't, you know, again, you go back to this can't be done for people. They have to play a part in it. They can have people assist them, but it's got to be a team effort.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I just want to say thanks very much again for your time, Derek. It's always fascinating to hear your insights on this subject, on well, multiple subjects. So I just want to say thanks very much for your time again, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, see you later.